So question one, how do I move past perfectionism and fear of being judged so I can get more done and get it done faster? I love this question, and it comes up a lot. It's definitely one that I had where you know that perfectionism is getting in your way, but you have no idea like how to stop worrying about every single little detail. The type of coaching that I practice and the way that I break these things down is that your nervous system is triggered by a thought that often comes from your socialization as a woman, that we have these specific beliefs about how we're supposed to be in the world. And that triggers your nervous system and it leads to a set of behaviors. And those behaviors lead to outcomes that you see. And so, what I'm going to do is I'm going to break down each step so that you understand, like in this instance, that perfectionism is triggered by this idea that, like, I have to be a good fill in the blank. I have to be a good parent, leader, partner, daughter, friend, whatever it is. But we have all these ideas of what a good fill in the blank looks like. And when we're not meeting that, it triggers our nervous system and we go into a flight response. And the flight response is perfectionism, where we're trying to just avoid any error ever, right? And we're like burning ourselves out doing it. That's what happens is we overwork, we overthink, we exhaust ourselves, and then we burn out. So that's the path from your socialization to the thought that triggers your nervous system and the behaviors and the outcomes that come out of it. Okay, so let's break this down even a little bit further. So your nervous system is triggered, your amygdala and a little help from the hippocampus flood your body with adrenaline and cortisol. And that's often triggered by thoughts that stem from your socialization. And so some of the thoughts, we already talked about one, like I have to be a good and fill in the blank. And that will lead you to people pleasing, which is a fawn response, right? Like I'm going to prioritize other people's needs above my own. Or you might have a thought like, I don't want to screw this up. And that's going to lead you to perfectionism, which can either be a flight or a fight response, right? The pursuit of perfectionism is actually a flight response, like you're running towards something, but there can also be a fight response where you're beating yourself up for not being perfect. Or you have a thought like, I'm not good enough or I'm a fraud, right? And that creates self-doubt. And a self-doubt response is actually a freeze response where we're just stuck in the moment. Or it could be that you think, I'm going to miss something. And I hear this one from my clients so much. I feel like I'm forgetting something all the time, right? And it creates this constant low level anxiety with like pings of flooding of adrenaline and cortisol, right? Where if you looked at it on a chart, it would be like this low level thing that just has these spikes here and there of like, oh my God, I did forget something. But that can keep you, if you're so worried that you're going to miss something, you can get indecisive, right? You can think, oh, well, I don't know all the steps and I don't want to screw this up, so I'm going to not decide. And that'll get you in a freeze response. Okay, so what's the socialization that's pushing on this? So for people socialized as women, our validation comes from our external sources. So people validating us either through our appearance or appreciating our caretaking activities or the way that we're showing up and being there for other people. So what happens when we get our validation from external sources is then we're worried that we're going to screw it up and then people are going to think X, Y, or Z about us. So if we're not doing it right, if we're not showing up perfectly, if we're not being a good fill in the blank and showing up for everyone, then we don't get the feedback that we're worthy because we're not socialized to look inward for that answer. Like, am I doing a good job? Am I a good person? Am I valuable as a human being? We don't look inward. And so, of course, we're going to overwork and overthink and perfectionism because we're trying so hard to get that validation that, yes, we're humaning right, we're adulting right, we're showing up for the people that we love in the right way. Okay. So how does this show up in our behavior? So we've talked about how our nervous system is triggered, what's triggering it within our socialization. So what are the behaviors that result from this? Like, well, one, of course, we overthink and we overwork and we catastrophize and we ruminate because our nervous system is literally making us feel like our lives depend on it. Like the adrenaline and cortisol that are coming into our body are no different than if we were about to be chased by a lion, or like a car turned when we were in the crosswalk and like just narrowly missed us or something, right? It's that same, like your body doesn't know the difference in like the idea of like how dangerous the particular situation is. But when we're always feeling like our life depends on it, which can come up so much in perfectionism, it's why we overwork, right? Then we end up feeling exhausted and we end up verging on burnout, or doing what I did as like, perfection. I'm still a perfectionist in recovery, right? But I burned myself out trying to be all things to all people and to do everything perfectly. And then the other part of it is that we're always so tired because we never, never, never get a break from our own minds. Before I burned out, it wouldn't have done me any good. I mean, maybe a little bit, to go take a vacation, but wherever I went on vacation, I was going to take my brain with me, and my brain was going to drive me bananas. It was just going to be like spinning and churning through all these things. This is something that I work with my clients a lot. I talk about it. I frame it as, we're going to clean out your mental closet. So we're going to stop, we're going to take down the volume on replaying the conversations that you've already had, all the to-do lists that you're like making while you're doing dishes, or you're in the shower, or you're driving, or whatever, right? Rehearsing all those conversations that you haven't had, worrying about like the plan of, well, if this goes wrong, then we have to do this. And if this goes wrong, and and that might happen, right? And we have, instead of plan like 1 to 3, we have planned through like 1AC7 430 million, right? Like every single possible outcome. And we're just exhausting ourselves doing that. So what are the things that come from these behaviors? What I was just talking about. We end up with a 24/7 dialogue in our heads. I'm worried I'm forgetting something. I'm always triple checking. I'm running back through what I've done and planning what I need to do and what could go wrong, right? That alone is so, so, so exhausting. Just being able to turn down the volume on that, like 10 or 20%, you'll find that you have so much more energy. And definitely come to one of the monthly master classes, because I teach you in those 4 tips to really start. And they're so easy. They're so super easy and simple that will like really, really make a huge impact on starting to bring that volume down, so you can just get a little bit of space in your own mind and have a little bit more energy to deal with the rest of the world. So the other outcome is we end up in this constant state of fear. But what we're really worried about, what we're worried about when we're trying to be perfect, when we're trying to think of every possible thing and have a plan for it and make sure, is that we're afraid that something's going to go wrong. And if something goes wrong, like how are we going to show up for ourselves? We're probably going to show up and we're going to should, could, and would on ourselves. We're going to increase our suffering by by regret and telling ourselves that we did it wrong and we should have known better and we could have tried harder, and we dramatically increase our own suffering. And so what we're afraid of when we're doing all of these perfectionist things is simply how mean we're going to be to ourselves in the future if it doesn't go the way that we want. And so the really good news about that is that we're in control of both ends of that, right? We can take down the volume and stop the perfectionist stress and worry and overwork, but we can also decide in advance that we're going to have our own backs no matter what, that we're not going to shame and humiliate ourselves on top of any like mistake that we made or decision that we made. So my tip for you on this is to cancel the woulda triplets. So the woulda triplets are shoulda, coulda, and woulda. I should have done this. I could have done more. If only I would have done this. So what we want to do is those words, we're using them to judge ourselves. And when we're judged, we feel shame and embarrassment and humiliation and regret. And no bad bitch ever took over the world with those feelings. So what we want to do is stop creating that by doing it on ourselves. So how do we do that? Well, here's what we don't do. If this is like we're beating ourselves in the head with the hammer, I should have known better, I could have done more, we don't put it down and then pick up a mallet where we start beating ourselves in the head. I shouldn't be shooting on myself. What we want to do is just get really curious. Why am I using those words right now? Why do I want to judge myself? And sometimes we can think, well, so you don't screw up again, right? But we want to just get really curious about like why we would want to do that. And then take the volume down on that self-judgment. Of course, you can use different words to judge yourself, but you're just going to have to get a lot more creative. And just that alone is going to take the temperature down on your nervous system and just get the blood back in your brain, help you think more clearly. Okay, so to help with perfectionism, we're going to cancel the woulda triplet. So that's my big tip and my big takeaway for you on this one.